All
Hi,
right.
everyone. Welcome to Radical Co-Founder Candour. We are going to be sharing everything as honestly and openly as we can because why not?
Why not?
I don't understand why more people don't do this. Um, quick update on the week. It's been really exciting. All the numbers are going up, but more importantly, we've been interviewing some really cool, exciting people.
Yeah, a growing team is always really interesting. Getting to see what we're going to do next, as well as where we are now. So that's why the interviews have been eye-opening for me.
Yeah, I think nothing teaches you better who you are than interviewing someone because like who we thought we wanted going in probably isn't who we've ended up with, and that's
Yeah,
and
what
and
happened to
I
us?
think we've perfectly got the right people because we're like, yes, as soon as you talk to them, you're like, yeah, no, that I want you.
Yeah, the biggest takeaway I think I'll say is that we were on one of these calls with the guy with someone that said, "Oh, that sounds really overwhelming and scary." And I was like, "Okay, well, if that's one of the feedback that we're getting, it's probably not for you, but it means that when we do say the right pitch to the right person, their feedback's going to be, I'm excited, I can't wait."
Yeah, it's gonna
So
be a match, basically.
I mean,
yeah,
to be fair to the guy, like half of what we do is overwhelming and
it's
scary.
huge.
I
Yeah,
just the secret is loving it, right?
exactly. So it's not a bad thing, and for you to recognize that straight away is a huge positive. But yeah, it kind of re-emphasized what we're trying to do, and we're able to say, here's who we are, and the people that love it really get it, and that's brilliant.
Yeah, I think like that's surprisingly, I think that's one of the best things about me is that like I very often don't think about consequences. I'm like, okay, let's do it, let's try. And I make decisions to like, start a school in a different country, like move to other country for to start education. Like I did such decisions. I make such decisions without thinking about it. And I think from perspective, it's amazing. Like, sometimes you can fuck up, but looking, back at my life, so many great things happened only because I was like, yeah, okay, let's do it. Like, I will not think for a week and analyze it, but just start.
Yeah, despite our differences, I think that's one of the key things we have in common. And I've been hearing a few podcasts with co-founders, and it's always the same. The interviewer's like, "Wow, that seemed really brave," or to throw away like Jeff Bezos throwing away his job at a hedge fund, and it's just like, yeah, yeah, but like for you, it would be obvious to stay where you were, but for us, like, why would you ever do that? Why would
Yeah,
you ever stay where you are?
staying still doesn't make any sense to us. What they've chosen to do is just as crazy for us as how they view our risk. I see what they're doing is they're risking their whole life by not having it, which is terrifying. I'm more scared of them than they are of me.
Is indeed. So I thought I'd do a nice little episode that's sort of going to bring us back to our origin story. So when we do the spin-off films, our audience are ready for that. So we can talk about, yeah, comparing now and then. What were our assumptions when we got started with this thing, and how have they met up with reality? Jacek, do you want to go first? Do you have any obvious assumptions when you started?
Yeah, like again, I think for me, I didn't really, to be honest, at the beginning, I was not convinced. I was like, yeah, let's try this. But I think the good thing was that I didn't realize how difficult it is and how much money will be involved. I didn't think ahead, like, oh my God, like this will cost so much money, like the development and everything. And again, I think that was one of the reasons why that was maybe the lack of assumption was actually positive, which I don't know if I can advise that approach.
Oh, your assumption was that you assumed it would be easier than it was. You made an assumption, maybe like more subconsciously than actively. And interesting, that assumption you said you had that at the start. I talked to our developers this week, and I showed them the graph showing like how much money we make and how much money we cost, and showing them that we're still in the red at the moment. And they're like, "Oh wow, I didn't realize it cost so much to get started," and also that you're still, you're
Can
still
you
paying
share
off.
that graph actually? Because I think it's quite beautifully illustrative,
Definitely, yeah.
more than your hand dancing on the
No,
screen.
let me just pull it up. I'll pull it up because I have it as a separate.
Yeah, yeah, while you do that, I'll just say that, yeah, I think even when we show people the numbers now, they're like, wow, that was brave slash crazy. And you're like, yeah, and that's now you know that we're making an app that's successful. At the time, I had no idea that it would work. It's mental.
Yeah. Yeah, it reminds me of the interview with Elon Musk. Musk I've seen a while ago when somebody asked him like a few years ago, if Tesla will succeed, and he was like, probably not, And I think we had this moment like 6 months ago or 7 months ago when we were like, I don't know if this is going to work, but we still moved forward.
I'd still rather be trying and failing than not.
Sorry, let me just pull this up in a second. But yeah, the idea. Here we go. Let me just share my screen. I'm not used to only having one screen. There you go. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Brilliant. So this is the custom charts 2020, and these are the actual numbers, just drawn in a prettier way on this chart. What you can see here is that this is the monthly income versus cost. So this was that the cost every month from the start of January was the costs were always higher, and only when it started to get to October, November, did we even see the point where we made slightly more than it cost us. So this was the inflection point where it's like, great, now everyone can actually get paid. And by everyone, the directors, the three of us, eat last. So we were the people not getting paid to fund this red line. What does that actually look like? Well, it looks like this, that the cumulative totals, income versus costs, you can see that by the December 2020, we'd earned $328,000 in this case, but we'd spent $440,000. So even though things were looking great, and you can see this curve and go, everyone's doing really well, and we're making money now. Yeah, the truth is that there's still a long way to go, and yeah, a lot more effort to put in.
But yeah, I think yeah, go for it.
I was going to say that ties into the assumption then. So my assumption it would cost a lot less than it did would be the key one. I thought that it would be easier to build something and then build it and they will come, more like an overnight success. And yeah, that would be the basic assumption, is that the cash cost was high and the time cost was a lot higher than expected.
So it's why the two books I recommend are The Lean Startup, but also Crossing the Chasm, because everyone reads The Lean Startup and they're like, yeah, just build a skateboard. I'll make a cheap product and that'll be easy. And I'm seeing a lot of people in the low code space, which I love, by the way, and I think shows huge potential to open the barriers for entry for more people to get involved. But yeah, if you read The Lean Startup, you're like, cool, just a couple of credit cards and I can I can build an MVP, which people will buy.
I've got a book, $100 Startup. And it's like, great, that means I can do it. And it's not to say you can't, it's just
you can start a lemonade stand for that.
Yeah.
And you can seed the idea and you can see if it's worth it. I think the biggest assumption we had is that we would make lots of apps that would be all equal. We'd have lots of equal children in this case, and I designed lots of ideas and we said, cool, all of these will be equal, they'll maybe grow equally.
The model I said was how fish have babies, right? Like, so we'll just see how many babies we can make, and then hopefully one will survive in the ocean.
I think the hardest, like the assumption change from that for me was when we had a bunch of apps, so many, and we had to then make that decision point and say, here we go, we're going to focus all on one. And that's kind of like the highest risk point, right? Because you're saying, oh, but any of these could have potential, but you have to double down and double down again and again on just the one that's going to win.
Yeah, and in terms of making it cheap, it was funny though, because we all hoped we could make something MVP cheaper, but we weren't cheap. I remember negotiating with Hitovo to build the app, and they were used to people putting loads of clauses in the contract and loads of reviews and backwards and forwards, and we just knew that would mean we spent more time in contractual negotiations and more time reviewing stuff and getting management involved, and we were just like, just how much dev time can you give us for this money we have in our savings account?
Yeah, and the difference there is that the way it was going to be managed. So it wasn't just we have a design and we think if we send design and with cash in an envelope, the app will get returned to us in 6 to 8 weeks, right? Mail order. It wasn't like that at all. I think the hands-on approach was saying, give us the dev time and we will make what we want of it. We're not going to hold you to it. If this app wasn't a success, in a contract isn't going to work. That's not a way to build a team.
Yeah, I think the fair assumption, like looking back, I would say to myself back in the day that just assume everything will cost twice as much or 3 times as much, and it will take like way longer to like develop.
Well, our actual numbers initially, they were like 10. We said like maybe 30K. We could build an app for $30,000, and then once it's built, and then it will start maybe paying for itself at that point, or make revenue, or make some micro apps that make some money. Yeah, it did not cost 30K. It cost closer to 300.
I've met people that made an app with 30K, and it was outsourced to the first cheapest bid they got from an Indian development house, and it just about worked, and it was enough to get some customers. And then it's then you can't win, because as soon as the thing scales, you're then having to call up this dev house you don't have much of a relationship with and be like, oh shit, spaghetti code needs fixing now because the servers are crashing and we're making really bad first impression with our first customers.
Yeah, and that's the key thing, is that we got lucky, or at least had the relationship with the right people. So it's very hard to just Google developer, and first hit is the best one. So that relationship that we built up over time, we physically went out there, which you can't do right now in COVID. We did have some Zoom calls that were quite difficult. I remember we had some Zoom calls with Hitovo right at the start, and it was okay. We were trying to explain our ideas and what we were trying to do, but nothing really came across quite right. But then when we were stood there in the kitchen one afternoon, having a drink and talking, that was where we actually got to know them, and they got to trust us because of that.
Yeah, that's where they felt our enthusiasm for it.
Yeah.
Enough that, I mean, let's be honest, we didn't build it because we had £300,000 in the bank to spend. We said, I remember this conversation, negotiating payment terms is actually more important to us than negotiating price. So I don't mind if the day rate's 100 more, as long as we can pay it over a year.
Yeah,
it's like finance, right?
That was actually the best decision we made, was the payment terms. So we said, look, we will pay you what slightly more if that's what it costs, but can we delay the payment terms? So we'll pay like 2/3 up front, and then we'll delay that 1/3. And that 1/3 was delayed for quite a while. And then we even extra delayed it by another, once we got to the final deadline, we then said, cool, now we'll start paying it over a year. But the payment terms is what helped us, because you can do so much if you're given just a little bit more runway. And when you talk about investors, Hitovo by that definition was a big investor, because they gave us the money over time, which gave us the time to build the thing.
Yeah, it's kind of like getting married and getting a mortgage in the same time. And that's why I think it's crucial to choose the right partner, and like how you're gonna do it. Because it was amazing to work with the right partner, somebody who we could trust, and like the payment terms were super flexible for us. Imagine like not having Kotovo, like probably we would never be here without that.
Yeah. And so much of this is because we were in the space, right? Like, that's how me and Jacek met, was working for an Atlassian partner. That's how Tom and I met, working for an Atlassian partner. And so, yeah, when we sent Tom contracting, that was able to help fund the business, because we had contacts from that work and Tom's experience. And then we also knew what products to develop, because we've been working in the Atlassian space for so long. We knew that a lot of people were neglecting the non-technical teams working in Jira, so that was something we were aware of, and then we knew who would buy it first once we'd actually made the features. So that was
that's good, actually, because we've talked a lot about assumptions, the assumptions we made. There are some assumptions we didn't make, and one of the big ones we didn't make was, do people want this app? So I remember we went to, because Hitovo, when we first pitched the idea, because they were the first people we were pitching to, and they said, well, how can you be sure that people want this? And I'm like, because I am sure, like, that's the one thing we are sure about, is that if we build this, people want it, because I've spoken to them, dozens of companies, hundreds of people that need this functionality, and there is a gap for it that's not being serviced or could be done better. So yeah, you can't necessarily make assumptions on or complete guesses on everything, but you have to have some hill to die on, and for us it was that people do actually want this feature.
Yeah, and the two metrics we really looked into, one was you had a very clear idea on how, not just personal stories and anecdotes, but actually you could show in the Atlassian community forums how many people were complaining, wishing Jira had this feature. Yeah, voting for the feature
was enough.
And it should be interesting for the people who listen to this to explain, like, what custom charts was at the beginning. It was basically the feature that could allow you to pick the
Color
colors.
pie chart picker for Jira, for Confluence. Sorry.
It was just for Confluence because that's where we decided non-technical users would be. So it was just for Confluence originally. It was a Confluence app, and it was just for Confluence Server because that was day one. And someone bought it for maybe like $7 or $10 the first sale because it was slightly better than the built-in report, and you could change the color. I mean, it was pretty terrible as an app. It barely worked. Like MVP is probably too ambitious. It just about turned on some of the time, but you could change the color, and that was it. And I think we built up every other feature since then because customers requested it. And looking now, it's like, oh, it's a reporting tool the same as all the others. It's not actually. It's more of a collection, like a zombie collection of features, but every single feature is really good. And there's a bit more method to it now with the designs. But yeah, we focused purely on the features themselves that people needed. And to be clear, that's still what we're doing. So when customers say, can it do this? If it doesn't fall within our laser focus of non-technical users and generic solution, then I say, sorry, like, I'd love to do that. I can see it's amazing, but it's not for the 80%. It's for the very small few people that want this, which is unfortunate because everyone wants everyone has a great need for their own problem to solve, but we're trying to get the people that don't get served, that don't get the help.
I was worried because I think a big problem with all these things, there's always people complaining, there's always people wanting the feature, but very often you're not competing with a competitor. You're competing with either do nothing or how they do it currently, which is just export to Excel and do it there. And that was hard. I still don't know how you assess whether someone will be like, oh, this is worth paying for, rather than, oh, but we do it in Excel. And even though we'll complain on the Jira board that we shouldn't have to do that, maybe the people complaining aren't the end users. It's a different group of like, wish their data wasn't in Excel, but the end users are quite happy exporting to Excel.
And this is kind of what I've realized, that even that Excel part of it is a misnomer. We make assumptions about our users. Again, let's talk about assumptions. Assumptions about who the end user is. Some of the assumptions are, oh, well, what's the alternative? And we say Excel is the alternative because we're used to being slightly technical, so that we know that I could export the data from Jira and I could make a chart in Excel. But that's kind of like a flippant response. That's kind of like the most likely outcome is that people won't do anything. It's not that they'll use Excel. It's that the majority won't do anything. And that's the actual default is no, we're competing against not doing it versus doing it, not doing it in a different tool. It's not doing it at all. And that guides a lot of the decision making, because we're not competing against a tool. We're competing against apathy of not doing it at all.
Yeah, and that is a hard to sell.
Yeah, and I think what was super important was like basically this market research, because like I've seen in Atlassian space, people developing huge apps or big pieces of software, and then they were like, oh, we hope that somebody will buy it or somebody will need it. And I think we had a pretty humble approach to it. We didn't get attached to our ego and like what we want, but we listen to Tom, like, okay, people will need this. We look at the community pages, like who's like asking for what, and then we just focus on that, on like solving the actual problems.
Google search volumes as well. So this was something I was able to show Tom, and combining those two data sets was actually quite interesting. So wasn't just votes in a forum, but also like, look how many people are searching for. And the big thing I always say is that no one searches for your app. No one searches for like the name of a product. What they search for is how to do this. And those questions are so informative. And often they're looking for how to do this in Jira. And we know the answer is you can't. So, okay, let's build the app for it.
Definitely, yeah.
I think my main assumption was that we would spend a lot more time looking towards the competition and being like, okay, so even in the 10 app model, right? Like we've made a mini version of this and a mini version of this and a mini version of this. Let's just see what they do and make it slightly better in some way and focus on that, right?
Competition is good for inspiration. And what I like to look at the competitions, alternative apps, let's not say competition, but what other people are using. And I think that the actual features, the top level features are, it's a pie chart and it's a bar chart. All the apps make exactly the same thing. If you put them side by side, they look a bit different. But as an end user, you'd say, cool, they're identical because they're just bar charts. What we bring to it is the UX of building it and all of that thought that goes behind it. So we can say, oh, great, I really like that feature, that like quick click there, or that toggle. We should be using that. And if you combine that, we can kind of cherry pick all the features that people are using, the ones that I think are good, and it's built on top of a layer of ease of use. So we're not recreating pie charts, we're recreating ease of use, and that's our USP, right? That's what we're good at. Everything else is just is functionality on top of that.
And I think that's connected to another assumption we had, which was, I think, correct 100%, that the whole market and the whole space will go towards non-technical users. That Atlassian as a whole, we will grow into, HR departments, finance, marketing, like all those departments. And, average people don't know how to code. So I think we made this assumption as well. And we kind of surfed this wave of Atlassian moving into those non-technical departments and teams.
Yeah, I mean, that was an assumption that thankfully seems to be right, I'd say. If you look at the recent announcements, so Atlassian, just as we started Old Street, and we were actually, Automation for Jira was one of our first marketing clients. We were giving them some advice and working with them. And then, yeah, like soon after they were acquired by Atlassian. So that seemed to be like some validation that Atlassian were looking to make things easier for less technical users, or at least that's where the market was growing, where the demand was. Likewise, if you looked at the announcement, was it yesterday, about this new version of Jira for less technical teams?
Yeah. The slightly more
Jira Workspace, is it called?
Yeah, Workspace, even easier. It looks a bit like Excel, a bit like Monday Asana style. It's that really non-technical, just click and play, not much admin, which is brilliant. And I think, the non-technical teams is a nice focus. It is our persona. It's our laser focused niche. But the key thing we do is save people time. So non-technical teams is the persona. But why do the non-technical teams need us? It's because it saves them time. So what we're actually doing is selling them their time back to themselves by saying, cool, so if you're a non-technical person, it would require you to either not do it or spend 10, 20, 30 hours on YouTube learning about EasyBI. Whereas if you use custom charts, we're saving you time as a non-technical user. So we picked our niche and then sold them their time back to them, which is what people really want.
Yeah, I think that's so important that, first of all, like Tom said, you have a niche. You don't sell a general solution that anybody could be using, because that's a very difficult market. And then just showing people numbers. Yeah, like with our solution, you just save time, and people understand that language much better, because at the end of the day, as I always like to say, people don't want to get the washing machine. They get the clean clothes. Like nobody cares about custom charts, but they buying the result of using custom charts.
Yeah, if you said for half the price, the washing would turn up clean every day, you'd be like, I want that solution.
They lose their loyalty to their washing machine brand pretty quickly.
Yeah, that's what we're selling. It's like it's the emotion of having more capacity, more free time, more availability, self-determination, control. Those are the emotions that you need to be interacting with, and that's why I think enthusiasm is really contagious. Talk about contagion in a difficult time in the world, but yeah, enthusiasm is very contagious. And I think that when I do the demos and talk to customers, it's so important to just be really engaged and say like why we're building it, and to be super clear, this isn't some generic solution. It is a really good solution for this problem. You need it. And yeah, when people see that, they think, wow, this is something somebody needs or what I need, then I can help them.
Yeah, it's interesting thinking about selling time, because again, you get it all the time with people arguing in the community. Like when I'll say, here's an add-on, and they're like, I don't want a fucking add-on. I want Jira to do it out of the box. And you're like, I know, dude, but we've literally been able to build a company and spend all the money we just showed betting that Atlassian won't build it in the near future. So I'd recommend you check out this add-on.
Yeah, and it's that's a whole different argument around why Atlassian doesn't have everything built in, and they are acquiring more and building more, but there is a marketplace for a reason. And the fact that it doesn't come out of the box means that Jira is cheaper because they didn't have to build it in-house themselves. And also, there is no perfect in-house solution where they make everything as well as we do. We care more than any internal team about this particular niche we're servicing. And that's something that you can't replicate in a giant company, even just by acquiring.
So that leads me on quite seamlessly to a big assumption I have when talking to friends and family, potential investors, even potential employees, and it comes up again and again. What if Atlassian decide to make custom charts because they're bigger than you, they're closer to Jira than you, they have a lot bigger team than you and a lot more money, and the assumption is that we're living on borrowed time, right? Like we're living under the shadow of a giant, and one day when it moves. And funnily enough, very recently, Atlassian announced they were doing a big acquisition of Chart. Is it called Chartio?
Chart.io.
Yeah. And yeah, I had a bunch of panicked phone calls from people being like, "You okay, Chris? How are you taking the news?" And we did, if we're honest, like hold our breath for a bit, check it out, and be like, "Is this the death of custom charts? Is it today?"
Yeah, I think that's it's good to have some motivation. I'm not going to take that away from you, Chris. I'm not going to take away your we need to do as much as we can now because we're on borrowed time. Like, everyone's on borrowed time, right? Like no matter how you define it, you're on borrowed time by some metric, right? So whatever help motivates you. But as I see it, the fact that I relish the challenge of someone trying to do it better than me. If Atlassian, I like the reporting stage because it's fairly level playing field. It sounds odd, but like the dashboard itself is you get one eyeball, like two eyeballs to look at the charts, right? So however, it's all about the UX of getting there, but it's a fairly level playing field at that point. So that's a huge advantage of dashboard reporting. But I think that I love the idea of someone saying, I can do it better than you. And I say, great, if you could do it better than me, then I don't even need to do this job anymore because I'm not doing the best in the world at it. I'll do something else that I can be the best at.
We did have that interesting conversation. God, it must have been this time last year where someone offered to acquire us and politely but gently said, if we didn't accept the offer, okay, we will have to compete with you. We'll build it ourselves.
It was like, great, could you? That'd be brilliant. Then you've proven that what we're doing is easy and anyone could do it. And then we don't need to do it anymore. We can focus on the stuff that we're good at. It's like being told you're the best, being like the best guitar player when no one else plays at all. And then suddenly Jimi Hendrix comes along and you're like, oh, cool. So, now I can look up to someone else or gives you something to fight for, more inspiration. Like anyone that's worried about competition because of competition's sake, like that's a losing position to be in.
Yeah, it's true. If we were only making money because there was no competition and it was going to get wrecked, I'd rather know sooner rather than after years and hundreds of thousands of pounds of investment.
It's fundamentally flawed, yeah.
And like in today's day and age, like no industry, no space is safe. Like what's the average, how many years a company is on the list of the top 500 companies? Like, even the biggest companies are disappearing, and
you've got Warren Buffett's moat analogy, right? Only invest in stuff that's defensible. And it's like, sure, but what is a company and what is defensible? Particularly in software, we don't have even the code itself, even if it was shared online, that doesn't mean someone can just take it and run with it. It's the team that develops it, the passion that we have for building it, the support, which is what enterprises want. So I think that...
And let's be clear as well, we're outside of a kill zone. And I think that's my advice to someone small wanting to do this, is like Warren Buffett's point, Peter Thiel saying competition is for losers, right? If you're in an area that you're like, oh my God, this is such a good idea, why hasn't Google done it yet? Well, there's one of two reasons. Either because they've tried and it doesn't work, or two, they're just waiting for someone like you to run the experiment. And as soon as you start getting some success, they'll be like, oh yeah, that does work. We'll have a go.
The assumption that I'm currently making about that, my current assumption is that we aren't big enough for anyone to care. So the next big wave, if you're $1 billion company, you care about what you can do to make the next billion. And if someone offered you 10 million, you'd say, well, why are you even talking to me? This conversation has cost me more than that, right? So therefore, if you just aim to not aim to be too small, but pick something that they don't want. So the next wave is AI, machine learning,
big data.
reporting,
And that's
right?
the point. We are very small data reporting.
Yeah. And Chartio is brilliant for that. It's this big data lake solution, huge list of buzzwords we can go through about all of this, which is brilliant for those data scientists with PhDs. Like, that's what the billion-dollar companies on Wall Street want to see, and that's ideal. But you said be slightly outside the kill zone. They're like, well, why would we acquire or build something like that? Because it's just for people clicking around. Like, that's not going to scale. That's not going to last forever. And it's like, okay, but people still use Excel, and there's not that much machine learning and AI in that. There are markets outside of the kill zone, definitely.
It reminds me of Gary Vee saying that everybody's trying to make next Uber, things like that. And, the simple stuff is not sexy enough for people. And I think that that's the secret. There is like so many niches that you could just start working. And maybe it's not the next Uber. Maybe you're not going to be a billionaire, but you could have a very successful business in that niche.
But there's a key point there. If it's not sexy enough to get investment, your business plan has to not expect to get investment.
Yes. Yes, definitely. And I think redefining success is the follow-on to your point, Jacek, is if you can be successful in a small niche. But a lot of people would say, well, I don't define that as success at all. Like, you're only making that. Like, so why, you can't scale to billions of dollars. It's like, yeah, that's not how we define success. So you have to know what you want. Otherwise, you will be unhappy by not knowing.
Gentlemen, good conversation. That brings us nicely, I think, from where we are now, sort of to our origin stories. And I think that'll be a good topic of conversation for next week. We'll talk about who we are, what our backgrounds are, and maybe if we have time, get into how we met.
Brilliant. Right. Thanks very much.
All right. See you next week.
Thanks, gents. Take care. See you next week.
Cheers, guys. Bye.
Bye-bye.